Hello, my name is Sasha Struthers. I'm an employment attorney here in Los Angeles, and today I'm doing a video on sexual harassment, what it is, how an employee can report it, and some of the protections that employees have if they are a victim of sexual harassment. So to begin, sexual harassment, which is something that just, I guess, will never end, is one of probably the most common harassment cases that I see in the state, probably also in Los Angeles. It's slightly different than other bases of harassment because it has what's called quid pro quo, which is this for that. So oftentimes an employee sexual harassment case comes down to an employer makes some sort of advance, makes some sort of request out of the employee in exchange for giving the employee some sort of benefit, promotion, extra money, like a pay raise, some sort of, accolade, things like that. Sometimes, and even is that the sexual harassment is based on, if you don't do this, then, I'll fire you, I'll demote you, I'll do something to jeopardize your income. So that's quid pro quo. That doesn't happen in other forms of harassment because there's not a this for that exchange. If it's, let's say, disability, discrimination, harassment, race harassment, things like that, don't have that kind of exchange. The other thing that often arises when there's sexual harassment is a hostile work environment. So if it's someone who doesn't have a sense of authority over you, or doesn't have a strong sense of authority, so maybe it's, a company with multiple levels of management. So someone who's kind of a lower level manager doesn't really have the ability to, promote you or fire you or, demote you, write you up, something like that. Then what ends up happening is you get what's called a hostile work environment. And it's what it sounds like. It just is very hostile to work in this environment, and it's very uncomfortable. This I see most often in probably warehouse environments and restaurant environments. Those are the ones where it's usually the main boss or the company owner is not really around very often, and there's, lower level kind of what's called leads, or managers that are kind of on the ground in the warehouse or, in the restaurant floor, who oversee employees, but don't really have the power to hire or fire employees, can't really discipline employees, things like that. And so it becomes hostile in the fact that, this person will make advances or comments towards another employee. And then when that employee brushes them off or requests them to not keep pursuing this, or, please leave me alone, I'm not interested in you, then they start to be very disgruntled. And they're, will say passive comments, be mean, very aggressive with this person, show favoritism towards other employees. So that happens. But all in all, if someone either they have some position of authority over you, or is even a coworker, but is harassing you and making it very uncomfortable for you to work, based on them having some sort of affinity for you or attraction to you that you do not share or reciprocate, then that is grounds for you to complain about said conduct. And that leads to the next part of this video, which is, how do you report it? And again, this comes down to what your work environment is like and if there's a hierarchy. Sometimes you can go to a supervisor, and there's usually forms of confidential reporting. If it's a small workplace that doesn't have many employment policies or a handbook and doesn't have a procedure for complaining, then you can go to their office or send an email, give them a phone call. That is one way you can report it. If the supervisor is the one that is harassing you and you feel like uncomfortable reporting to either their supervisor, or there's no one else above them to report to, there's no outside HR agency, then that is when you either go to a government agency or you hire yourself an attorney. So people will come to me and complain, that they're being harassed at work, and then, I work with my client to address these claims with the employer. What is very common that I see, and is very unfortunate, is that people get so uncomfortable based on being harassed that they end up actually quitting their job based on harassment, which is, again, what's considered constructive termination, in which the employer did not provide a work environment in which the employee could continue working based on this harassment, which resulted in a form of wrongful termination or constructive termination. So you, as an employee, if you're being sexually harassed and you, let's say, go to a government agency like the DFEH, or you hire yourself an attorney to seek, monetary compensation for this harassment, one of the things that an employer can't do is fire you. If they fire you for doing this, then that would be considered wrongful termination. So it's one of the protections you're afforded under several California laws and labor codes. But not often is someone who is being sexually harassed and want to continue being employed by the same company or by potentially the actual harasser. So in my time in doing an employment law, which is several years now, I've seen sexual harassment cases come in many, many different forms. And I've had it where it's a coworker sexually harassing, and this is reported to the employer, but the employer either kind of had favoritism for the harassing or the harasser. That harasser's been there long on the company. They didn't want to deal with it, so they either ignored the complaints or fired the complainer for complaining. I've seen it where two people, employer, employee, have, are in relationships, and the relationship falls apart, and then the employer kind of holds that over the employee, and it makes it uncomfortable for the employee, so then the employee has to basically quit. I've seen it just straight on assault and battery in the workplace, based on that's an aggressive form of sexual harassment. That's not, fortunately, I haven't seen that too often, but it is where that's actually been the case in cases I've dealt with. So if you feel like you're being sexually harassed, if someone is making advances at you, comments at you, they're making you very uncomfortable, and you either tried to report this, have reported it, no one's done anything about it, or the person harassing you is a figure of authority and there's no one else above them to report to, then you should reach out to an attorney and talk to them about your rights, the potential recourses you have, and the steps you can take to protect yourself, to be compensated for the harassment, and to look at other potential problems that may be occurring in your work environment. That is all I have today. If you have any questions or you're experiencing this, feel free to send me an email and we can set up a consultation. Also subscribe to this channel because it's great and you should just do that and make my day. And I hope nobody's being harassed, but I know it happens. And so in that case, I wish everybody safety and their well-being, and that I stress the importance of putting your well-being first, because I will assure you nobody else will do that for you. Thank you.